Leinster put on a very impressive performance against back-to-back champions La Rochelle and, in my opinion, solidified themselves as the slight favourites for this year's Champions Cup. We'll look at how Leinster managed to get on top early on and get a very healthy lead. Then, we'll look at how La Rochelle managed to come back to within 10 and finally how Leinster sealed the game strongly. Let's start with Leinster's approach to this match. Leinster wanted to stretch this La Rochelle defence and move their big forwards across the pitch throughout the match. We can see this in their passing and kicking game. Leinster made 168 passes with 109 carries, which ensured that they drew a lot of defenders. They also made a total of 31 kicks, which is more than we are used to seeing. This focus on the kicking game was perhaps their biggest weapon in this match, and it is illustrated in their territorial stats. A massive 95% of the game was played outside of Leinster's 22, with 29% played in La Rochelle's 22. A really interesting stat is that 44% of the match was played between Leinster's 22 and the halfway line. I think there are a few reasons for this. As I mentioned, the kicking game played a massive part, but I also think Leinster's defence was absolutely exceptional. Leinster's attack is one based on efficient passing and deception. They play with a 1-3-2-2 structure with a focus on a lot of interplay between their forwards and their backs. This ensured that they would constantly stretch La Rochelle's defence. This period is the perfect example of Leinster's attacking philosophy. La Rochelle exits from their goal line and Bear takes it in. Over the next few phases, Leinster set up their attacking structure and they eventually find themselves on the right side of the field. From here, they play out the back from their pods and quickly shift the ball to the middle of the field. Now, notice how La Rochelle is using the 13+2 backfield defense instead of the pendulum. One of the weaknesses of this defense is that it can leave a lot of space behind the defensive line for short-range kicks. The way to think of it is that the 13+2 strengthens the defensive line because you will mostly have 13 defenders in front. This gives you more opportunities to press aggressively and to overwhelm your opponents. The pendulum, on the other hand, maximizes your backfield strength, at the cost of only having 12 defenders in the front depending on where the ball is. Back to the example, this quick distribution to the middle of the field forces Dylan Lates out of the backfield to cover the space on the wing, leaving loads of space in behind. La Rochelle's backfield defenders don't adjust quickly enough to cover the kick, and Leinster regather up the field with tons of attacking momentum. La Rochelle's defence does well to hold out Leinster for a few phases, but eventually they concede. Another massive aspect to Leinster's dominant performance was their defensive effort. They were extremely physical both in contact and at the ruck, which prevented La Rochelle from getting into their rhythm. Here, La Rochelle have a line-out with the idea of playing an 11 play, meaning that they want to put a crash ball into the middle of the field and then play to the blind side immediately when the defense is disorganized. Leinster managed to keep their connection strong and they managed to hold the ball up in contact. Kurbalo takes the ball quickly and then makes a less than stellar switch play with Tolu Latu. This means that Latu is tackled behind the gain line. From here, Leinster's defensive line is set very strongly and they shoot up off the line quickly to make the hit as fast as possible, which leads to another dominant tackle. Look at how this tackle is unfolding though. Leinster are committing 3 defenders in the single tackle, which means that La Rochelle has very low ruck speed. One of La Rochelle's biggest trademarks is the fact that they outmuscle pretty much everyone who they play against. Looking back at both the previous 2 Champions Cup finals, one of the main reasons that La Rochelle managed to come back both times was the fact that their forwards would give them extremely good platforms throughout the match through physicality. Leinster's defensive goal was to take away this core strength by stopping their momentum before it could even get going. Leinster's defensive philosophy for this game was to be highly aggressive and to protect the gain line at all costs, meaning that they placed a special emphasis on La Rochelle's pods by deploying a defensive line that focused on blitzing instead of drifting. What this did mean is that La Rochelle would have more opportunities on the outside of the field. But I did think that Leinster's centres did particularly well in shooting up to prevent La Rochelle from distributing the ball to the wider channels. So how did La Rochelle manage to come back to within 10 then? A big reason for this was their set pieces. While the lineout was evenly matched with both teams having good platforms overall, the scrum was another matter. La Rochelle managed to turn over half of Leinster's scrums while still having a decent line-out win percentage and being on par with Leinster during restarts. We can see one of Leinster's inaccuracies when La Rochelle scored their only try in the 3rd minute of the first half's overtime. La Rochelle has an attacking line-out on the 5-meter line, and they are of course looking to maul this. They opt to go to the back of the line-out, and the throw is pinpoint. Leinster also chooses to compete in the air. This is a risky strategy for sure, as it means Leinster will have less players to defend the initial hit once the maul sets, but there is a higher chance of stealing the ball. Unfortunately for Leinster, the maul does indeed set, and La Rochelle has a ton of momentum to get over their line. I really do think that this was the wrong call. La Rochelle's forwards are bigger and they do have more power than Leinster's, but I do think that Leinster were more technical in contact for the majority of the first half. They did dominate the physical contest, and defending the maul was more feasible in my opinion. The last thing that I want to talk about is how effective Leinster was in their counter-attack. Because they pushed their opponents back so much, it meant that La Rochelle had to make a lot of exit plays. Unfortunately for them, many of these didn't find touch, and it gave Leinster excellent opportunities to effectively counter. I don't really think that this was a technical decision, as it would make zero sense to give Leinster's back three the ball in space, and it would mean that the ball in play would be much higher, which is not what La Rochelle would have wanted. So really, I think that these were inaccuracies that Leinster exploited well. Leinster has truly made a big statement following the strong win over La Rochelle, but it remains to be seen if they can truly go all the way this year.